There are stories that leave a mark, not on paper, but on the soul. This is one of them. Welcome to Veil Marks, where we believe every scar holds a secret, and every silent love deserves a voice. In this video, you'll witness a bond forged in fire, trauma, and unconditional trust between a little girl and a giant dog, forgotten by the world. As the old saying goes, some angels choose fur instead of wings. Watch till the very end, because within this story lies a lesson you were meant to remember. And if it moves you, leave a comment, subscribe, and help us reach 1,000 hearts. The rain had been falling for what felt like forever. Gray clouds swallowed the small town of Silver Pine, Oregon, draping the narrow streets in a quiet, misty sadness. It was the kind of afternoon where people chose fireplaces over front porches, soup over strolls. But Ellie was not like most 9-year-olds. Barefoot on the wet porch, she squinted through the curtain of rain, her oversized yellow raincoat draping her tiny frame like a cape. Something or someone was out there. Across the street, standing perfectly still on the sidewalk near the abandoned firehouse, was a dog. Not just any dog. A giant, muscular creature, soaked to the bone, its charcoal gray fur plastered against a frame that spoke of both power and pain. One ear was half torn, its legs marked with long, deep scars that told stories no one had asked to hear. Its eyes, though those deep amber eyes, were soft, almost human, sad, tired. And yet, there was no fear in them. Ellie leaned forward, clutching the wooden beam of the porch. Her parents were asleep upstairs, recovering from night shifts. She knew better than to wander alone. But something inside her stirred. The dog didn't move. It didn't bark. It didn't run. It simply stared back, unwavering. She took a step into the rain. By the time she reached the edge of the front yard, her hair was soaked, tiny curls clinging to her cheeks. The mud sucked gently at her boots, as if to whisper, "Stop." But Ellie kept going. And the dog, that massive battle-worn creature, he didn't flinch. Only when she was a few feet away did he lower his head. The moment their eyes truly met, Ellie gasped, not from fear or even surprise, but from a strange, almost dizzying rush of familiarity. It hit her like a forgotten song on the radio, like a smell from childhood, something ancient, buried deep, cracked open inside her chest. She had seen him before, maybe not here, maybe not even in this lifetime. But those eyes, she knew them. The dog stepped forward slowly, deliberately. His paws left dark prints in the sidewalk, heavy and quiet, and then he did something unexpected. He sat down in front of her, bowed his head, and gently nudged her hand with his nose. Ellie didn't mean to cry. She didn't even feel the tears coming until they warmed her cheeks, blending with the rain. Her small hand trembled as she placed it on the dog's head. His fur was coarse, matted in places, yet strangely comforting, like the worn fabric of a childhood blanket long kept at the bottom of a drawer. "Who are you?" she whispered. The dog didn't answer, of course, but his eyes. They said everything. Ellie named him Moose, though she didn't know why. The name just came, as if someone had whispered it to her from far away. Moose. It suited him. A giant in frame, yet gentle in presence. That night, she snuck him into the garage. She found old towels, warmed up leftover meatloaf, and whispered apologies for the cold concrete floor. Moose didn't complain. He ate, curled into a corner, and slept his breath deep and rhythmic, though every so often his legs twitched, as if chasing something in his dreams. Ellie stayed with him until almost dawn. The next morning, she told her parents about the dog. They were hesitant. Her mother muttered something about danger, about stray dogs carrying disease. Her father asked practical questions. Was it chipped? Was it lost? Ellie only said, "He saved me." When they asked what she meant, she shook her head. "I just know he did. A long time ago." I think there was no explaining it. It wasn't just that she felt safe around him. It was deeper. She felt seen, protected, as if Moose carried some invisible thread that connected to the corners of her mind she'd long forgotten. Sometimes She'd find herself sitting quietly with him, and images would flicker in her memory, flashes of fire, the sound of a woman screaming, the suffocating heat of smoke, and always, those same amber eyes looking at her through it all. But that couldn't be real. She was only 5 when their old cabin caught fire. Her family never talked about it. She didn't remember how she got out, only that she had woken up in a hospital, her mother beside her, crying and whispering, "You're safe now, safe." Because of him? Moose followed her everywhere after that. To school gates, to the grocery store, to the park bench where she liked to read. People stared. Some crossed the street. Others warned her parents. But Moose never barked, never chased, never growled. He simply watched, as if guarding her from a danger only he could see. One afternoon, Ellie found herself staring into his eyes again, and this time she whispered, "Did you come back for me?" Moose blinked slowly. The wind rustled the leaves behind them, and in that moment, she felt it again, the undeniable truth, buried in her bones. This wasn't just a dog. This was a soul that had once walked through fire for her, and somehow had found its way back. And for the first time in 4 years, Ellie felt the warmth of something she didn't quite understand: hope. The garage had become Moose's sanctuary, a quiet place where the rain couldn't find him, where Ellie's gentle hands replaced the cold grasp of fear. But even in the stillness, even as days passed and trust bloomed between child and dog, something about Moose remained. Distant. His eyes, though full of warmth for Ellie, carried shadows deeper than any child should ever have to notice. One afternoon, as Ellie brushed the dried mud from his coat, she noticed a worn leather collar beneath his fur, loose, aged, and almost hidden. Faintly scratched into the underside was a phrase, just barely legible: "Trust is everything." It stirred something in her, a feeling again, that strange weight in her chest, like a song she used to know. Later that week, she saw an old man walking by the front fence. His name was Walter, a retired firefighter who lived 2 blocks over. He stopped, leaning heavily on his cane, when he spotted Moose lying in the yard. "Well, I'll be damned," he murmured. Ellie, curious, asked him what he meant. "That's no ordinary mutt you've got there," Walter said. "That's a soldier. That's Moose." He sat down beside her on the porch, slowly, his knees cracking like old furniture. Then he told her a story that would change everything. Years ago, Moose was part of a specialized 9 rescue unit, trained to respond to the worst of disasters: fires, floods, blizzards. Moose had been there, not just strong, but smart, brave beyond reason. He'd been deployed across the state, saving hikers buried in snow, children trapped under collapsed roofs, even nursing home residents lost in smoke-filled halls. But his last mission was the one that sealed his name in hushed firefighter circles. There had been a wildfire in the southern woods near the edge of Silver Pine, an unpredictable blaze that tore through cabins and campsites in the dead of night. Moose had gone in with his handler to search for survivors. A child had been left behind, a little girl. The flames were too wild, the air too thick, the visibility near zero, and then Moose disappeared. They found the girl unconscious near the river, wrapped in a wet blanket, her skin scorched but alive. No one ever saw Moose again. Until now. Ellie sat frozen, her heart pounding. "That girl," she whispered. "Was it me?" Walter looked at her, eyes narrowed. "Maybe. I remember they said she was about 5. Lost her memory from smoke inhalation and trauma. Never spoke about what happened. Can't say I blame her." Ellie didn't speak. Her breath caught in her throat. All those half-dreams she'd had of fire, of heat, of running, weren't dreams at all. Moose had saved her, and she had forgotten him, but that was only half the story. Walter's voice turned quieter. "There's more." After that mission, he was listed as MIA. Everyone assumed he died, but word got around, whispers of a dog matching his description, turning up far from here, and then vanishing again. No one had known the truth, not even Walter. What really happened to Moose during those missing years? The answer came unexpectedly. Ellie's father, a science teacher, with a habit of collecting old radios, found a news report buried in a late-night podcast. It talked about a now-defunct facility that had been operating in secret, shut down for unauthorized animal testing. They'd focused on resilience experiments, testing pain thresholds, trauma response in dogs rescued from service. One dog had escaped, large, gray, with a scarred ear. No name was given. Only one detail stood out. He had a collar inscribed with the words, "Trust is everything. Moose." It was too much to take in. Ellie sat beside him that evening in the garage, her hands trembling as she held the old collar in her lap. Moose lay still, as if he somehow knew everything had been uncovered. She looked into his eyes, pleading for something in answer, forgiveness, or maybe just time. "Is that why you don't bark?" she asked softly. "Because of what they did to you." He didn't respond. He only blinked slowly, then nudged her shoulder with his nose. Not a bark, not a growl, just a quiet reminder. He was still here, and still her protector. Later that night, Ellie couldn't sleep. Her dreams were a blur of memories rushing back, hot air, flames, a low growl that turned into a whimper as a heavy door slammed shut. She remembered arms around her, fur pressed to her cheek, and the sound of a low, guttural cry as Moose refused to leave. Even as the fire closed in, he had carried her, dragged her, even when his own paws bled. He had saved her life, and then the world forgot him. They left him behind. Her parents found her crying on the floor the next morning. Moose curled up behind her, his great head resting in her lap. She told them everything, every piece of the story, as it now lived inside her chest, like a second heartbeat. "He's not just a dog," she whispered. "He's a hero. My hero." Her father wiped away a tear, unable to argue, because Moose was more than just fur and muscle. He was living proof of loyalty that outlived even memory, a soul marked not by medals or parades, but by scars and silence. He didn't need applause. He only needed someone to remember. Ellie didn't need to say much. Her eyes, wide with something that looked a lot like longing, did all the pleading for her. After a long conversation that night, her parents, initially hesitant, finally agreed to let the Pitbull stay for a few days. "Just until we find the owner," her father added, though deep down, he already knew that something unspoken had begun between the child and the dog. The giant Pitbull, who Ellie named Moose, settled into their modest Oregon home with surprising ease. He never barked. Not once. He didn't whimper, growl, or even yawn loudly. It was as if he knew noise might break the fragile new world he and Ellie were building together. At first, Moose would simply follow Ellie at a respectful distance, 10 steps behind on the trail to school, curled near the door when she watched TV, lying outside her bedroom without ever entering. He didn't invade her space. He protected it. Then, one night, it happened. Ellie had a nightmare, the kind that came in waves, like thunder shaking her small frame. She awoke breathless, drenched in sweat, her little fists gripping the sheets. Before she could even cry out, Moose was there, silently. He nudged the door open with his nose, walked to her bed, and gently rested his broad body beside her. She didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She simply reached out and wrapped her arms around his warm neck, burying her face in his coarse fur. And for the first time in months, maybe years, Ellie went back to sleep. It became a rhythm. Moose seemed to know when she needed him. If she was happy, he walked beside her calmly. If she was anxious, he would position himself between her and whatever troubled her. If she was quiet, he'd stay closer, never touching unless she made the first move. But every night, without fail, he lay by her door, her silent guardian. Her parents started noticing something too. Ellie, once so withdrawn and quiet, began humming to herself again. She smiled more, ate more, slept longer. Her therapist, who had been working with Ellie for over a year, was stunned. "I don't know what changed," the woman admitted, "but it's working. Keep doing whatever you're doing." Ellie didn't tell the therapist what she'd begun to remember. The memories had started surfacing gradually, like scattered pieces of an old photograph, slowly drifting back into focus. The smell of burning pine, the crackling roar of fire, screams in the distance, and then a shape, a dog, massive, covered in ash and blood, charging through the smoke like a beast from some ancient story. He had reached her, thrown his body over hers, as burning beams collapsed around them. He had not run, he had not flinched. It was Moose. One afternoon, while brushing Moose in the backyard, Ellie paused and looked him square in the eyes. "You saved me, didn't you?" she whispered. Moose didn't nod, he didn't need to. There was something ancient and solemn in the way he blinked, as if he carried not only her pain, but all the stories he could never speak. Later that week, Ellie found an old photograph in a family album, one she'd never really noticed before. It was taken by a news crew after the forest fire, almost 4 years ago. A small, soot-covered girl being lifted into an ambulance, and behind her, half buried in ash and debris, stood a giant Pitbull, head raised, eyes alert. She ran outside, clutching the photo. Moose was lying beneath the old oak tree, his eyes half closed in the afternoon sun. When she held up the photo, he opened them slowly. "It was you," Ellie said, her voice trembling. "I knew it." Moose nudged the photo gently with his nose and then rested his head on her knee. He didn't need her thanks. He didn't need praise. He only wanted to be near her, to protect her, to love her in the only way he knew how. Her father watched from the porch, arms folded. "I don't think we're giving him up," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. Her mother, standing beside him, nodded. They found each other. You don't break something like that. Over the weeks that followed, Ellie and Moose became inseparable. Where she went, he followed. Where he waited, she returned. She talked to him as if he understood every word, and maybe he did. At school, her drawings began to fill with fire and dogs and ash. But at the center of every one, there was always a beam of light. A girl and a dog standing together, facing whatever the world dared throw at them. The neighbors began to whisper. Some were nervous about the size of the dog. Others questioned why they took in a stray, especially one with scars and a haunted look in his eyes. But those who dared to ask were gently told the story about a forgotten hero, about a little girl with broken memories, about how love doesn't always need to be spoken to, be understood. And at night, when the stars came out and the wind rustled the pines, Moose would sit at Ellie's window, not to guard, not out of duty, but because in his quiet world of sense and instincts and loyalty, he had finally found home again. The fall morning began like any other. The wind carried the faint scent of pine through the air, and the sky was overcast in the way only an Oregon sky could be, soft, brooding, and heavy with memory. Ellie, holding her backpack with one hand and gripping Moose's leash with the other, walked to school with a lightness in her step. Moose had been with them for several weeks now. He had become more than just a dog. He was her protector, her best friend, and in a way she couldn't explain, a piece of herself. But that morning, something changed. As they turned the corner near an old gas station, Ellie noticed a black van idling across the street. Its windows were tinted, the kind of tint that gave no reflection, only darkness. Moose's ears perked. His body stiffened. His massive frame lowered into a silent, alert stance. Ellie had never seen him like that. She felt her heart skip a beat. Then the van door slid open. 2 men stepped out. They wore matching dark jackets and moved with mechanical coordination. One of them called out, "There you are," not to Ellie but to Moose. In that moment, everything shifted. Moose stepped in front of Ellie, shielding her, and let out a deep, guttural growl that made the ground seem to tremble. Ellie stood frozen, her mind racing. The men advanced slowly, as if trying not to startle a wild animal. But Moose wasn't running. He was calculating. "Ellie," he nudged her back with his body, pushing her toward the alley behind the store. "Run," and she did. They tore through the narrow alleyways of the neighborhood. Ellie could hear the footsteps behind them, could hear the men calling to each other. "Do not lose that dog," one shouted. Moose led her through shortcuts, backyards, even over a small creek. Ellie didn't ask questions, she just followed, trusting the unspoken urgency in every movement Moose made. It wasn't until they reached the woods at the edge of town that Moose finally paused. He sniffed the air, checked behind them, then gently nudged Ellie to crouch behind a large log. For minutes, maybe hours, they hid in silence. Moose pressed his massive body against her, keeping her warm, grounded. Later that night, back home, Ellie's parents were already waiting with the sheriff, panicked and overwhelmed. Ellie explained everything: the men, the van, the way Moose had reacted. Her father looked at the dog with new eyes, as if seeing him for the first time. The next few days were tense. Ellie noticed things she hadn't before: scars along Moose's torso that didn't look like ordinary wounds, a tattoo on the inside of his leg, an alphanumeric code, a metal fragment near his shoulder, discovered during a vet visit, which didn't show on any of the medical records they had. Her parents began asking questions. A family friend, Mist Doyle, who had served in the Marines, offered to investigate. Days later, he returned with a pale expression. "There's no official record of this dog," he said. "No adoption papers, no rescue organization listed. His chip was either wiped or never registered. But the tattoo, it's from a private defense contractor, not military. Something off the grid." He laid a file on the kitchen table: photos of a facility in Nevada rumored to be involved in illegal animal experimentation. "They've gone underground," he added. "But if Moose was theirs, they won't let him go." Ellie couldn't sleep that night. Her memories began to claw their way to the surface again. She remembered the fire from years ago, the chaos, the smoke, a giant dog leaping through flames to reach her, the feel of his body shielding hers. And now, looking into Moose's eyes, she knew he was that dog. And now he was being hunted. The pit in her stomach grew. She could feel Moose's unease too. He didn't bark. He never barked. But that night, he paced the hallway for hours, standing guard like a soldier awaiting battle. Ellie lay in bed, watching the doorway, knowing deep down that the past hadn't finished with them. The next afternoon, while riding home with her dad, they noticed a drone hovering near their street. It zipped away the moment it was spotted. Her father accelerated, Moose in the back seat growling low, his nose pressed to the window. That evening, the power cut out. No storm, no warning, just darkness and silence. Her father grabbed the flashlight while Ellie clutched Moose's collar. From the corner of the room, Moose stared at the back door, every muscle tensed. Ellie's mother whispered, "Is someone outside?" Then came the knock. Not a knock, really, more like a test, a soft tap. Then another, then silence. Moose positioned himself in front of the door, growling deeper than Ellie had ever heard. Her father moved slowly toward the door, weapon in hand, but Moose growled sharply, "A warning. Do not open that door." The next morning, they found footprints in the backyard. Boot prints, deep, precise, leading right up to the back door and disappearing. The family installed cameras that day. Sheriff Thompson promised to patrol the area more frequently. But Ellie knew that wasn't enough. Moose hadn't escaped a random lab. He had fled from something dark, organized, and relentless. And now, it had followed him. Ellie looked at Moose that night, curled up beside her bed, his breathing steady but alert. She touched the tag on his collar. "Trust is everything," it said. "I trust you," she whispered. And in Moose's quiet, solemn eyes, she saw not fear but readiness. If they came again, Moose would be ready. And this time, so would she. The wind howled through the empty stretch of road as Moose ran, his muscles taut, his senses sharpened. Behind him, Ellie stumbled over roots and gravel, her small hand clutched tightly in his mouth by her sleeve. The forest was their only hope now. The men in black were close, too close, their flashlights slicing through the trees like blades. Moose had seen them before. He remembered the scent of latex gloves, the burn of chemicals in the air, the metallic clang of locked doors, and he would not let them take Ellie. When the first crack of gunfire rang out, Moose didn't flinch. He veered left, nudging Ellie into a hollow beneath an overturned tree trunk. His eyes met hers, pleading. calm, determined. Then he ran. It was not an accident. Moose knew what he was doing. Drawing them away was the only way to keep Ellie safe. His giant frame moved through the underbrush like a silent shadow, leading the men farther and farther into the abandoned industrial outskirts. But this wasn't a chase anymore. It was a sacrifice. One of the men caught up, raised his weapon. Moose didn't slow. Another flash of light. Another voice yelling. He dodged left, leaped over a ditch, then right into the clearing of an old, rusted bridge, forgotten by time and swallowed by vines. It was here that they caught him. It was here that the trap was set. No one in town knew who those men were. They never wore badges. They never gave names. All anyone knew was that sometimes dogs disappeared, especially strong ones, especially those that once belonged to the force, like Moose. The ropes were thick. They looped around his chest and front legs, hoisting him from the ground, suspending him from the central beam of the bridge. Like a grim warning, his head hung low, the collar still clinging to his neck, etched with fading letters. Trust is everything. He didn't whimper. He didn't fight. His eyes looked toward the forest, toward the place he left her. A long hour passed before someone came, a man named Carter, mid-50s, flannel shirt. On his way home from a fishing trip, saw the glint of silver in the moonlight. His truck came to a stop. He blinked. For a moment, he thought it was some sick prank, but then the dog moved barely. Oh, Lord! Carter scrambled, climbed up the base of the bridge, cut the ropes with his pocket knife, and lowered Moose onto the flatbed of his truck, with all the care of lifting a child. Moose's breath was faint. Blood matted the fur on his shoulder. His paw had been twisted, but he was alive. Barely. Back at home, Ellie had screamed when she realized Moose was gone. Her parents searched, called shelters, knocked on neighbors' doors. But in her heart, Ellie knew he left to save her. Again. When Carter's truck pulled up at dawn, the little girl ran barefoot into the street, as if something inside her just knew he was there. The sight of Moose, battered and still, broke something inside her. She knelt beside him on the driveway, her tiny fingers brushing the dirt from his muzzle. Her tears fell freely. Her voice trembled. "I remember now," she whispered. Her parents stood frozen. "I remember the fire. You jumped through it for me. You carried me out. I was crying. You were bleeding. I saw your eyes." Moose stirred, his breathing shallow. "I didn't remember before, but I do now. You saved me. And I forgot." She pressed her forehead to his. "Let me save you this time." That day, the vet came. They stitched the wounds. They reset the bone. They gave Moose medicine and hope, but no one knew if he would make it. He didn't eat. He didn't move. It was as if, having fulfilled his final mission, Moose had let go until Ellie came into the room with something in her hands. A drawing, crude, childlike, drawn with crayons. It showed a little girl, a burning house, and a big dog with a hero's cape. She laid it beside him. "This is you. You're not just my dog. You're my angel." That night, for the first time in weeks, Moose opened his eyes and nudged the paper with his nose. And for the first time since the fire 4 years ago, Ellie smiled without fear. Moose survived, but he would never be the same. The once mighty giant Pitbull now walked with a limp, a reminder of the battle he chose to fight not for himself, but for the little girl who had unknowingly been a part of his past. His breathing was slower, his steps more cautious. Yet his eyes, they burned with the same quiet strength, the same unwavering gaze that had once stared down flames and monsters in the dark. Word of Moose's miraculous survival spread like wildfire. It began with a blurry photo taken by the passerby, who found him hanging from the bridge, shared on a local rescue forum. The caption read, "He didn't fight. He watched the woods, like he was guarding something or someone." Within hours, people from across Oregon were sharing the story, posting images, speculating, crying. Then came the phone calls, letters, packages, a pair of boots from a retired firefighter, a pink bandana from a little girl who wrote, "For the bravest dog in the world, Moose, became more than a dog. He became a symbol, a retired veteran wrote in, saying Moose reminded him of his own 9 partner who had saved his life but never got to come home. A teacher from Washington used Moose's story to teach her 5th graders about loyalty and sacrifice. And a woman who had been grieving the recent loss of her husband wrote a letter that simply said, "Thank you for reminding me that love never dies." But perhaps the most powerful tribute came from the 9 Rescue Alliance. They had read about Moose's past, the unauthorized experiments, the wiped records, the silence he had been forced to carry, and they knew exactly what to do. They launched a national awareness campaign, naming it Save Their Silence. Moose's scarred face and wise, watchful eyes were printed on banners, t-shirts, and posters. His story was told not with words, but with feeling. It reminded people that behind every silent service dog was a tale of duty, pain, and profound love. Ellie watched all of this unfold with a quiet awe. She was just a little girl, but she understood something deeper than most adults did. She knew Moose wasn't healing for the world. He was healing because of love, and in return, he gave her the strength she never knew she had. Every morning, Moose would sit by the window. His body might have been worn down, but his soul remained untouched. When Ellie walked to school, he'd follow her shadow with his eyes. When she came home, he'd wag his tail once, softly, like a whisper. At night, when nightmares threatened to pull her back into the fire, Moose would climb onto her bed, stretch his heavy body across her legs, and fall asleep with a soft grunt, anchoring her to the safety of now. One afternoon, Ellie's father hung a wooden sign above the fireplace. Burned into the wood were 4 simple words: "Trust is everything, Moose." It was the same message engraved on the old collar Moose still wore around his neck, the same collar that had somehow stayed with him through fire, snow, chains, and freedom. Now, it would stay with him forever. Local news stations visited. A documentary crew arrived. They filmed Moose lying peacefully in Ellie's lap, surrounded by crayon drawings, get-well cards, and the occasional squeaky toy. Moose never looked into the camera. He didn't need to. His story was already being told in the silence. Then came a surprise no one expected. The town council voted to create a small monument near the bridge where Moose had been found. At its base, a bronze statue of a dog sat with its head bowed not in defeat, but in honor. And behind the statue, etched into stone, was a mural of flames, a child and a dog leaping through the fire. At the very top, in large block letters, "He never barked, but he spoke to us all." Ellie's mother wept when she saw it. Ellie didn't cry. She simply reached out, touched the stone, and whispered, "You're home now." As winter rolled in, the town changed. People became more gentle, more aware. Dog shelters received a boost in volunteers. Donations poured in for animal rescue organizations. Schools invited 9 handlers to speak to children about courage and trust. And on the anniversary of Moose's rescue, the whole town gathered at the monument with candles. Ellie, now 10, stood on a small wooden crate and read a short speech she'd written herself. He didn't have to be brave, but he didn't have to love me, but he did. Moose taught me that even if you're quiet, your actions can echo louder than any shout. Moose is not just my hero, he's all of ours. After the speech, someone in the crowd began to sing a soft lullaby. Others joined in. Moose, sitting in a small red wagon draped in a warm blanket, blinked slowly, his ears twitching to the melody. And then something incredible happened. Moose stood up shaky, uncertain, but proud. He took one step toward the crowd, then another. The silence fell over the town square as the giant dog walked, slowly, toward Ellie, then gently placed his head in her hands. For a moment, time stopped. In that moment, 1,000 hearts healed together. No one would ever forget what had been done to Moose. But more importantly, no one would ever forget what Moose had done for them. He had become more than a survivor. He had become the fire that could never be put out, the light in the darkest night, the proof that trust, once broken, could still be rebuilt one silent heartbeat at a time, and every morning after, as the sun rose over the sleepy Oregon town, Ellie would open the curtains, and Moose would lift his head to greet the light. The flame, once nearly extinguished, now burned forever. 3 years had passed since that unforgettable summer in the little town of Tillamook, Oregon, where the sea air still mingled with the scent of pine. The legend of the silent giant, Moose, remained etched in the hearts of many. Yet for Ellie, now 18, it wasn't just a story that lived on. It was a calling. Gone were the days when her world revolved around coloring books and lemonade stands. These days, Ellie's room was filled with worn textbooks on canine physiology, therapy practices, and trauma care. On her desk sat a faded photo, her younger self clinging to a drenched, scarred Pitbull, both of them blanketed in a hospital sheet. She looked at that photo every morning before heading to class. It reminded her of why she'd chosen this path. Moose hadn't just saved her life. He had reshaped it. That spring, Ellie graduated from the specialized veterinary rehab program focused on working and retired nines, a scholarship gifted anonymously, though in her heart, she knew exactly who had helped make it possible. The final exam wasn't a test. It was a promise to listen, to serve, and to never turn away from the silent ones who gave everything without asking for anything in return. On the morning of her graduation, Ellie stood in the courtyard of the rehabilitation center, sunlight streaking through her brown hair, now longer and curled at the ends, no longer a child, but a young woman with purpose in her eyes. Her parents stood nearby, their arms around each other, tears already in their eyes, and next to the podium, unveiled just the night before, was a bronze statue of Moose, sitting tall, head slightly tilted, that same calm gaze captured forever. It wasn't just a statue, it was a symbol, a reminder that even in silence, love speaks volumes. As the ceremony concluded, a surprise announcement was made. Each graduating student would now be paired with a dog needing urgent care, either abandoned, injured, or emotionally withdrawn. It was a new pilot initiative they were calling Hearts in Training. When Ellie's name was called, a volunteer appeared at the edge of the courtyard, holding a leash. A small German Shepherd mix stepped out, trembling, thin, and limping slightly. His coat was matted, his ears partially torn, and he bore the kind of eyes that had seen too much. Too young, but when his gaze met Ellie's, time stilled. There it was again, that look, the same quiet desperation she once saw in Moose, a plea not for food or shelter, but for someone who would simply stay. Ellie knelt down. Extending her palm slowly, the pup hesitated, then crept forward, one paw at a time, until his nose touched her fingers. A shiver passed through them both. The crowd hushed. No one spoke. And then, just barely audible, Ellie whispered, "Your name will be Rust, and you'll never be forgotten." Applause erupted around her, but Ellie didn't hear it. All she felt was the weight of the little body against her chest, and the beating of a small heart that dared once more to trust. From that day forward, Ellie and Rust were inseparable. She documented his recovery, gently and respectfully, from his first peaceful nap to the first time he wagged his tail without flinching. Her videos went viral, but not because they were flashy. They were raw, honest. Each clip ended with a photo of Moose's statue and the words, "Trust is everything." And people remembered. Letters flooded in. Other handlers reached out with stories of their retired nines. Families adopted again. Volunteers signed up. And Ellie, still just 18, began fundraising for a new rehab wing built beside her old high school, a sanctuary for dogs like Moose and Rust. It wasn't grand, but it was sacred. Each kennel had a nameplate, not just a number, a name. Some bore the names of fallen service dogs. Others honored dogs that had simply gone unnoticed in shelters for too long. But over the main archway of the building, engraved in steel, were the words Moose had taught her to believe. Love doesn't need words. Late one evening, Ellie sat on the porch with Rust curled beside her, stars blinking in the velvet sky above. She opened an old scrapbook filled with newspaper clippings, photos, and drawings from the past 3 years. There was one picture that never left the front page. Moose, soaked from head to tail, cradled in her arms on that fateful night. Eyes half shut but still watching over her, she held the photo up to Rust. He didn't bark. Not once, she murmured. Even when it hurt. He just looked at me like you're looking at me now. Rust nuzzled her cheek and let out a soft breath, a sound that wasn't quite a bark, but more like a whisper, a promise. The wind picked up gently, brushing Ellie's hair as if nature itself were listening. She looked out at the field, remembering everything, the fear, the fire, the loss, and the love that had outlived them all. Moose had been her miracle, but Rust was her purpose. And even though the world might forget names, forget dates, forget stories, the love that saved her would never disappear. It had simply changed forms, taken on new legs, found a new tail to wag. Ellie stood, took a deep breath, and whispered into the night, "Thank you, Moose, for everything." Then she turned toward the lights of her clinic, her home, with Rust trotting behind her, his limp barely noticeable anymore. And together, they walked back into a world where trust was no longer a hope, but a mission. Because some flames never go out, they just light the way for someone else. If you've made it this far, then you've felt it, that quiet ache, that invisible thread between broken souls that still find a way to love. This is more than just a story about a dog named Moose and a girl named Ellie. It's about the forgotten heroes who never ask for medals, the voiceless guardians who stand between life and loss. Moose never spoke a word, but he said everything with his silence. And Ellie? She listened. At Vale Marks, we tell stories like these, not just to entertain, but to remind you of what really matters: kindness, loyalty, the power of memory, and the hope that healing always finds a way. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." We believe in this dream with your support. If this story touched you, please leave us a comment, share it with someone you love, and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. That one click means the world. It tells us these stories matter. And remember this, sometimes the ones who never bark are the ones who save you. Until next time, keep your heart open and your soul listening. This is Vale Marks, where every silence carries a story worth hearing.